Hello, everybody. We tried to do this from the Raising Kids Without Sexual Shame page, but nobody hopped on. So we decided to move it to my personal page, which is where we've been doing it from before. So let's see if this works better. So our intention today, along with the other days where we've had these Facebook Live discussions, is to, just keep the conversation going. We want to have a conversation about how to raise kids without sexual shame. It's a fairly radical conversation, apparently. Yeah. And I feel very lucky that as being a moderator for Raising Kids Without Sexual Shame, I get the experience of hearing people be very real about raising their children and the complexities of raising their children in a world so controlled by sexual shame. Yep. I also feel lucky I get to work with this lady over here.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. We've been doing this for, so many years.
So many years. 7 years, maybe.
Something like that.
So, we suggested that, people bring their questions to this. And if you don't bring your questions, then I'm going to talk about the things that are in my mind, or we're going to talk about the things on Alina's mind. So one of the things that has come up quite a bit in the last month, I would sort of categorize into raising boys without sexual shame, or raising people with penises without sexual shame.
Yeah.
And I don't have one. So, it's part of wanting to have a conversation about it is it would be great if people that have penises would help us understand a little bit more what it's like living in our world today, and trying to exist without sexual shame. And then likewise, anybody who feels, who is a boy, and what that feels like to try and to live in the world without sexual shame. And then the parents that are raising boys and people with penises, that's mostly who I'm hearing from on our page. So one scenario that a parent asked me to share, and then we got a lot of feedback on, was around a boy asking a mother to paint his nails. And it was actually the boy's father who got very upset about it. And it was clear from our page that nobody on our page saw painting a boy's nails as problematic. So I hope that the mother that asked us to post that felt very supported in the responses. And the reality is, this is this boy's father, and this is her husband, and this is the situation that she's dealing with. So we can sometimes forget that these things aren't just theoretical, right? These are real people living in real time, trying to figure out how to be in relationship together.
Yeah, I have a friend, we just had a conversation just recently about her 8-year-old wore this really great outfit that was not overtly quote-unquote masculine for his first day of school. It was awesome. He just looked beautiful and dapper and wonderful. And she sent a picture to his father because they're divorced, and he was furious that his son didn't buy it, didn't look like the stereotypical masculine little boy that he would expected him to. And this little boy was thrilled to look as he did, and he was beautiful and happy and fun. And my friend was devastated that her former husband was so dismissive and angry and at the fact that he was going to get teased. It was one of the things he said. I got the privilege of some of the conversation that they had. She shared it with me. And we don't give little boys some of the freedom that we give little girls as far as dress and way of being and stuff. I think that comes up sometimes, which adds on to that.
So you feel like that's something you've seen, is that boys don't get as much freedom? Because another parent brought that up.
Absolutely. To me. I could dress however I wanted. I played powder puff football, right? When I was a kid in high school. I could dress however I wanted. I could wear jeans. I could wear sweatshirts. I could wear dresses. I could wear anything. And nobody, I was called a quote unquote tomboy, but that's it. And then I don't know a single boy in school who would have been allowed to wear a dress to school without being not just teased, but abusively teased and treated and mistreated. Yeah.
Which it's interesting, because one of the posts that we made just recently, and bear with me, I'm just kind of trying to make sure that people can get to this call that are trying to get to the call.
Well, a couple people have joined us. Hi.
I know, but there's some stuff going on the Raising Kids page, so I just want to see what's happening there. One of the posts that we made, maybe I may put it up yesterday or today, was about a school teacher wearing outfits, and she was a curvy school teacher.
I saw that.
Right, so it's interesting when I'm hearing you talk about you could wear a sweatshirt, but a little boy can't wear a dress. I'm also thinking about the voluptuous woman that can wear yoga pants, for instance, and be, told she has to go home.
Right. Oh, there was some schools that you couldn't show your shoulders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which just kind of is interesting, right? In the sense that there's so much policing around attire.
Right. Well, because if we're wearing
Focus
okay,
here.
because for women we are responsible for how we dress.
Well, again, why don't you talk about story what's happened to you,
right.
Situations you've seen.
Oh well, I remember being called a slut because I had my skirt. Oh, this is my favorite one. I was told by my cousin told my aunt that I couldn't be a Christian because my skirt was too short, and women were always held to a certain standard, and I was held to all kinds of standards as far as how I could dress. I couldn't have short skirts, I couldn't have tight skirts, I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that. So all genders are treated weird about how we are and how we dress, and it drives me crazy, I think. And sometimes what happens is we forget that our self-expression is our self-expression, and I still dress very slutty at times, in fact a lot of times, and I'm in my 60s, and I should act my age, is what I've been told before by more than one person, and I am totally acting my age. I'm 63, and I get to be as slutty as I want, and I get to dress how I want, and I get to choose that. And everybody should be able to.
So let's go back to when you were a child and they were saying those things to you. Did you understand it as a child? How did you understand?
Oh, I understood it as it was shameful. I was not allowed to wear short skirts, for example, and mini skirts were the rage in the 60s. I mean, that was the big thing in the late 60s. As I was a young teenager, everybody wore mini skirts, and I had to wear things below my knees. That was how I was dressed. So I would walk out the door and immediately start rolling up my skirt so that it was above my knees while I was at school, so I could be cool and hip, because girls who wore their skirts below their knees were not popular. And being popular was really, really important. So I wanted to be cool and popular.
Do you remember the first time you were shamed about what you were wearing?
The first time I was shamed? I don't remember anything in specific other than
Hi,
lots
Matthew.
of hearts. Thanks.
That's Matthew.
Oh yeah, I love Matthew. I think my cousin saying that I was, that was the most verbal one, was my cousin saying that I couldn't be a Christian because my skirts were too short. That's when I was 16 and finally started wearing skirts that I bought. And if I bought them, I got to wear them the length I wanted. Well, within reason. My dad was still kind of grumpy about it. But I had my own job, so I bought it with my own money. But prior to that, it was all stuff that was given to me. But I remember people making fun of me for being poor, people making fun of me for being not dressing sexy or modern.
At school?
At school, yeah. People making fun of me because I had too big of lips, because I was too smart. Oh, that's another one. That's one of my big things, smart girls.
So part of what I'm trying to get to is, as a parent who's actively raising two children, one of the biggest mistakes I can feel myself learning from over and over and over again is that I want my children to think like an adult. So I want to say, I don't know, if I want to say, like, if you do that, X, Y, and Z might happen. and them go, oh, X, Y, and Z might happen. Maybe I want to do that. Maybe I don't want to do that. And then like I taught them the lesson. I'm such a good parent. Yay, me. And it just
How's
really,
that working?
it just really doesn't work that way. So one of the great gifts of living in Seattle is that I got to be part of the Seattle co-op system here. And in the preschool co-op system here, we get parent education. It's actually a college credit course. And in that college credit course on basically child development, I learned that it takes 50 to 500 times to say something to a child before they learn it.
50 to 500?
50 to 500 times.
That explains my stepson.
So when I can hold... So let's just transfer that knowledge onto the discussion about how to raise kids without sexual shame, or even just how to raise sexually responsible, respectful human beings, right? So if I'm a parent and I'm trying to teach my child something about expressing them, something about sexuality, and that could be anything from the context of them having genitals and learning how to care for them and how to be in society with them, to boundaries, to learning outside messages that they might be coming in contact with. I mean, all of these things, right? So one of the things, Alina, and I was a little bit nervous about this call because I want to kind of talk about erections at some point. It's a little heated topic. Anyway, so we were talking, and one of the things that has been sort of close to my heart within the last month after talking to different mothers of people, boys with penises, is sort of the zero tolerance that we have. And okay, I get it. I totally get it. I get it. You have let's say you have a boy who has an erection, teen boy, he has an erection. It makes people uncomfortable because he has an erection. What do we do in that situation, right? So if I contextualize what do we do with that situation with, it takes 50 to 500 times for a child to learn something, that's where I feel like I don't actually know what you do then in that situation. So my hope was in particularly trying to start opening up a conversation about how we help our boys and how we help people that have penises as they're being raised into adulthood is I want us to talk about it more. I think one of the most detrimental aspects of shame is that it shuts down conversation.
That's right.
And when it shuts down conversation, we can't learn anything about anything, and it becomes almost a fester point for a bunch of baloney. Like we just all start talking around truths, and we start talking about nonsense, thinking it's truth, where it's really just something we made up in our own head. So if I have parents that are coming to me and they're saying, my son, for instance, is really curious about vulvas, I don't know what to do. Literally, that's what they're saying to me. Like, I would like us, as the people that are actually interested in having a conversation around how to raise kids without sexual shame, to be bold enough to start hypothesizing what that would look like. That's always been our aim in raising kids without sexual shame. It's not for me and Alina to sit here and tell you what we think should happen. The aim has always been to have a community dialogue where our intention is to learn how do we raise children without sexual shame in the context of the society we are living in today. So this has been a real hot one. And it's a little tricky for me because, like I said, I don't have a penis. I grew up, we used to call my house the girls' dorm because we had no men around until there wasn't really a regular man until I was 2 really, because my dad really started leaving around when I was 2. I didn't have a man in my house again until I was like 16 or 17. So, and then I would say that I don't find that at least the men I've been with are real comfortable talking about their erections or their penises or their sexual responses. And so some of what I'm hypothesizing, wondering, hoping we can start to maybe break down is if some of the lack of conversation is directly tied to the shaming that they've had being raised in our society. So how are we going to learn, for instance, the distinction between a normal physiological response to living in a body that has a penis to a sexually aroused person with a penis to predatory behavior. Like, just those three distinctions. Right now, they feel very much collapsed into one thing. I've seen an erection, and to give voice to the other side of it, which is, I have also spoken to people, adults, who have directly said to me that if they see an erection, they somehow feel responsible for it. Like, as though the erection demands attention. So what's going on in the midst of all of this, and how are we going to possibly get to anything? Hi, Gina. How are we going to possibly get to anything real? Because we know that erections happen physiologically, not in response to sexual arousal. And we know that erections can happen in response to sexual arousal. And we know that sexual arousal doesn't always mean an erection.
Right.
These things are all true.
Sexual arousal doesn't always mean that we're responsible for that sexual arousal.
Well, that's definitely true.
And that's another one, right?
That's definitely true.
They're all a possibility. Yeah.
Erections happen.
That's right. They do. One of my dear friends, her boy at 2.5, discovered that not only could he make his penis erect, but he could make it move up and down. And he loved showing us how he can make that happen. And we all laughed, and we thought it was funny because we're all sex-positive parents. And we thought it was hysterical. And you know what? I'm sure that if he did that at school, he probably would have gotten a lot of trouble. Luckily, he never did that at school.
I mean, it definitely wouldn't be allowed in school.
No. And it was a 2.5-year-old boy learning how that he had a penis and it could do things. And there was nothing sexual at all in that.
Yeah, the other thing I'm hearing in here as we're talking is curiosity.
Yes.
And the distinction between curiosity and sexuality. And sexual curiosity, right? I mean, there's like all of these distinctions. So, again, I would say my real hope is that even us taking the lid off of this will start to get everybody thinking more. We're trying to peel back the muzzle of shame.
The muzzle of shame. I like that.
So we can just have a conversation about some things. And one of the things we always say in our discussions is expect to feel uncomfortable.
That's right.
I'm uncomfortable. I'm terrified right now. My skin would be red if I showed red. When I just don't have that skin that shows the red, but trust me, it's all hot up here. And, so, like, I would rather, someone said to me the other day, the issue means more to me than my discomfort.
Right.
I think part of it is I would like to really know what predatory, like, let's get real clear on what predatory behavior is so that we can actually address it. And if we're not clear on the distinctions between these things, then we can't actually see what's predatory, what's not predatory, what's possibly somebody who doesn't want to be predatory being predatory versus somebody who's very purposely being predatory. I mean, there's...
Yeah, what the intent is, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay, we have something from Carrie. I'm striving for empowering my kids to feel confident in their own selves. I notice my daughters choosing to dress what our society would consider sexy. They are discovering their allure to boys at school. They get shamed from other girls more than boys. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, that's sad, actually. Yeah. That's actually really sad. So, again, I go back to the fact that we have to empower our kids to make choices that are the best for them, and that for however they walk within the world. And sometimes that means they have to be made aware that they're going to get shame, that they're going to get pushback from other people, and just sometimes the knowledge of that. So we're talking about having a conversation. So having these conversations with our kids, having these conversations with our grandparents, having these conversations with teachers eventually, but having the conversations and keeping a light on the situation, because dialogue brings in light is, I think, really, really important. So in talking to your daughters about the fact that, yeah, guess what? Some people are going to shame you, and talk about how that feels, how we respond, how they respond, the best responses, having the conversation, I think makes it really important.
So I went to a talk a while ago that a friend of mine invited me to come to that was at the University of Washington. And it was, I think I don't remember the author's name, but he wrote a book about being a black man in a post-Obama world, I think was the title of his book. And one of the things that I pulled away from, he talked about microaggressions. That's what he was talking about. And he had a list of things. And one of the things that he said was make sure your children know what microaggressions they will encounter in the world. And this light went off for me because I grew up around all these phenomenally strong women, was raised to be outspoken and expressive and to be myself.
Thanks,
and
Mom.
What I didn't know was that being a woman meant I was oppressed. I mean, I just really had no context for that. So it took me learning that. It took a long time before I really got how sexually harassed I was in high school. And in my situation, I was sexually harassed by boys. So what I gleaned from that when I start to step forward into raising my two girls is that I am going to let them know about this. I am not going to act like they're not possibly going to be shamed by other girls. I'm not going to act like boys won't be interested in them sexually because of the way that they are or who they are. I think that what I do when I have these conversations with them, and mine are younger, so I'm not in that teen phase yet, is to really focus on empowering them to be them,
right,
in the context that they are in. So if the reality is that they don't like that kind of attention, I would probably start to deconstruct that with them. And ultimately, they have a choice. They have a choice to say, I'm going to wear it anyway, and I can handle what comes my way. I might brainstorm some ideas about how they handle it when it comes their way. So that's me. And it looks like Michelle is already starting to post some things. So if anybody else has any ideas for Carrie about this. But yeah, for me, it's this combination of, I mean, really what it is trying to help empower my children to be them and be respectful of others' boundaries in the context of the reality that we live in today, which isn't always easy.
That's right.
So the reality is being who we are isn't always easy. So that's part of it. My nice guy clients view their erection as something to get rid of as quickly as possible, and we can trace this back to the shame experience when they popped a biochemically random boner in math class in junior high mixed with social programming that there is some medical health need to release ejaculate on a regular basis. Right. Right.
That's right.
I mean, that speaks to exactly what we're talking about.
I remember a conversation I had with, I got the great opportunity to speak to some 14 to 21-year-old at-risk youth, mostly kids of color, about sexuality a few years ago. And I remember back when I was a kid, one of the things that I would get from the boys was, oh, I got this erection and you got to help me get rid of it because, I'm going to get blue balls. And they would have these odd, weird things that they would bring up. And I was able to tell the girls that if a boy came to them and said, honey, I got blue balls and you need to help me with it, that their response would be, go fix it yourself. And then I turned to the boys and said, and when you masturbate, because that's what's going to help with those blue balls, use a condom. So then you learn to eroticize condoms. And all these kids were like, and then the girls were all like, yes,
Mm-hmm.
and because none of them had ever been told that they could tell a boy no.
Well, and when you're saying that, I'm thinking about, we get engorged too.
Yes.
I mean, right? It's like, what do I call it? Tissue rich with sensational opportunity, right? It gets engorged. It's erectile tissue. And so, like, yeah.
I call it a lady boner.
Right? I mean, how many women are going to how many people are going to, erections and being like, you must get me off because, maybe it's probably happening. Well, I'm sure it's happening.
Yay for Hitachis. No.
Yeah. So one thought I'm having here is, are parents teaching that erections can be physiological responses to just blood? Basically. Is that something that's being taught so that it's understood? When Alina and I were talking earlier, I was talking about how I've definitely been around predatory behavior when there's no erection around. So almost by, it's like this wish that is out there that you can find the thing that identifies it. And so the thing has become the erection.
Well, I doubt if very many adults with penises tell their children with penises that an erection could just be an erection, because most of them probably don't remember that.
Or did they even know
or
that?
Did they even know that when they were young? So having that conversation...
Or do they know that now? Because one of the things we talked about was the collapse of, I have an erection, oh, I must want sex.
Right.
Right? Like that collapse happens too. And could that be the direct response of having been a child, having had an erection, and somebody coming and assuming that this was because they wanted sex? So, like, how much are these messages perpetuating? How much are the lies perpetuating themselves?
Yeah.
And how much are they actually real? And the only way we're going to figure that out is to take the muzzle of shame off.
That's right.
And start talking about it. Michelle, thank you so much to you and to your clients for being bold enough to share these experiences, because this is definitely something that is sometimes missing from the conversations, because there is so much shame, so we can't actually have real conversations about real experiences that people are having. Hi, Abuela.
Yay.
Okay, Enrique says, I can't remember ever being shamed for a physical reaction to arousal, but that doesn't mean I wasn't shamed or that I'm not ashamed now. The fact that I don't even remember, and yet there is still shame, suggests some kind of mental blockage around the shame. Not even knowing where the shame comes from is a huge problem.
That's actually a real truth. That a lot of us have all this shame that I couldn't pinpoint where mine comes from. All of it, some of it I do, but some of it it's just there, and it's perpetuated because our family had shame, and then they, my father and my stepmother, lots of sexual shame, and then I'm sure her family, and then her, it just keeps going and going and going, and we just keep adding to it. So, which is why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah. So different things that come to my mind is the mother I spoke to this morning who was talking about her first grade son came home. I posted it on the page. Her first grade son came home with 3 love notes from 3 different girls that said, I love you. Do you love me? Yes or no? And one of the things this mother was saying is, and I've heard this from other parents too, is they think they're doing everything they can to raise their kids without sexual shame, and they're not sure why they're already seeing their kids have absorbed sexual shame. So that's one thought that comes up for me, thinking about what Enrique just posted and how much it's just in our culture. And then the other thought that I had was the adult, going back to the erection thing, was that, I'm thinking of one particular adult who was talking about when she sees an erection, she feels she must service it, like whether she's in the mood to or not. And we were talking about where does that come from, right? And so and then I was talking to Alina about that, and then Alina was like, well, they shouldn't feel that way. And I said, well, when you were 18, how did you feel? And Alina was like, yeah, I would have felt that way.
Yeah.
And so, part of what I was wanting to speak to is that the work that we have to do to go from thinking that way to not thinking that way. And, I really wanted Alina, and then I want us all to realize that in changing this conversation, a huge part of the work is to start deconstructing inside of ourselves where this stuff even came from, and A, to release it, and B, to help actually shift the conversation.
Yeah, I don't remember how old I was when I finally realized I had the power to really, really say no. I mean, I said no many times, but that it was really there, and I didn't feel guilt about saying no, because that was a big one. I would feel shame about telling somebody no, because I was responsible for that penis, remember? That erection. And so I felt guilt and shame for saying no. And then somewhere in my 30s, I think it was, there was this big shift in how I looked at the world. And I think part of it was finding the BDSM community, finding a community that deals with consent differently, or at that time it was already dealing with consent differently. Mm-hmm. You know,
yeah,
all the weird
huge.
stuff aside, but it really did change how I looked at the world. Yeah. Oh no, there's definitely weird stuff.
Exploratory
stuff. Yeah. But I learned about consent in a different way, and that was in my late 30s when that finally started all clicking a little bit.
You just said something really important, which is that you said you got into a community where consent was actually looked at, right?
Yes.
Like, let's actually... So, and how many years ago was that?
Okay, I'm 63, so do the math, and that was in my I was in my 30s. It was in the 90s.
So we have all these discussions now about consent culture. And really, it's very young. So, again, going back to my, I would love it if I could just say, okay, we should all have consent culture now. And like, that would just happen. But if it takes 50 to 500 times for a child to learn something, how long does it take for us to unlearn and then relearn something as an adult? So,
good point.
You know, trying to keep our own integrity about ourselves as we move towards consent culture is a big ask. And something we're going to do, right? Right. Yes. Everyone like and love that. Yes. We're going to do that. Okay. So Matthew says, my thoughts on erection are that I notice two distinct feelings between an erection and an orgasm. They're not one and the same for me.
I've met other men who said the same. Yeah.
Also, as a young boy, I don't think early on that I associated erection with sex. What I knew is that it felt good, and I wanted more of that. Also, masturbation just seemed to be the natural order. It wasn't something that was taught.
I have actually noticed that with young boys and girls, that there is it's natural to play with your genitals. It feels good. It's a good feel until they're told not to play with their genitals by well-meaning parents.
Well, and even that, adults. You know, that's a conversation we've had too, is like, when are you just touching your genitals like you touch your ear? Yeah. Scratch your nose. And what defines masturbation, I guess, is what we're talking about. So, right? And then when you could like play with your genitals because it feels good, and then you can play with your genitals to get off,
and that feels good too.
But it's a different intention, and so all of these things are true. And in a world that unfortunately has the muzzle of shame on it,
I like this. I'm gonna create a meme with the muzzle of shame meme of some sort.
Right, we don't get to talk about this. And these are the things about, you know, I want my daughters, for instance, to know these distinctions so that then if and when they are sexually active, they'll know they can learn the distinctions. And I feel like that'll prepare them to be less apt to be like, erection must stop being a human being and just do the thing that I think, the thing that the world has maybe, perhaps... Yes, I don't know. Damn it. Or
run away screaming. Ah.
Yeah, or who knows, right? Like, this goes back to this thing that we keep saying about, like, imagine if we never raised our children to know how to balance a budget. You know, it's like, how are they going to navigate being...
I wasn't raised.
How'd that work out?
I don't balance budgets really well. That wasn't a very good...
It is a good analogy.
Yeah.
We know that would be part of financially preparing our children. So part of sexually preparing our children is to have them know the realities of what sexuality is.
And in order to do that, you need to figure them out yourself.
And we need to talk about it.
Yeah. And reduce the muzzle of shame. The muzzle of shame.
Off the muzzle of shame. Oh, my God. Okay, it's been a half hour. I can't really see very well over there.
1:41. It's been longer than a half hour.
So,
Yay.
Thank you.
And somebody just joined. Aww.
So I will put this on our YouTube page. I will upload it to the Facebook Raising Kids Without Sexual Shame page. Hopefully we'll do this again real soon.
Now that summer's over and the kids are back in school, you'll see more of us. Definitely.
Yep. I'm teaching Increasing Intimacy at the Bellingham Sex Positive Center on the 24th of September. That is a class. There's touch involved in that class, clothing on, touch, trying to investigate what is intimacy. It's part of our Sex, Intimacy, and Relationship series.
On October 8th, we're
doing a double hitter.
Yeah.
Same place, Bellingham Sex Positive
What is
Center.
sex and conscious relationships?
Yeah, what is sex?
Do you know what sex is?
What is it? Do you know? Do you think your definition is the definition?
I challenge you to define sex and make us all agree. No, not gonna happen. Yeah.
Not gonna happen. Sorry.
You should see our list.
Yeah, it's fine. Okay. Bye.
Bye. Have a great